Have you seen this Boston cop that went down the slide?
No, I read a headline, but I haven't seen it. I thought that was, I wasn't sure if that was a real thing or not. How did
Okay, hold on.
that even happen?
I mean,
He defies the laws of gravity.
he's going down like at 100 miles, and he's wearing a gun. He apparently had to go to the hospital. First of all, what was he doing?
I don't know how that happened.
Their uniforms must be like made of slick nylon. I didn't have the audio, but you can hear him bouncing off the sides of the slide as he goes down. It's like he comes out. He was hitting his head.
Oh my God.
And he's a Boston cop. Don't you know? How much shit do you think he got back at the precinct?
What are you doing? What are you trying to park?
What are you doing down there?
Get some Boston Lager? You had too much Boston Lager.
That guy's the cousin from Boston.
Yeah, he's the cousin from Boston's cousin.
Yeah.
He's the other cousin.
Yeah, he's the other cousin from Boston.
Your other cousin from Boston.
Oh, Jordan, did we wake you? Did we wake you? I'm so glad you could join us.
I've been awake since
I know,
midnight. So.
Since yesterday at some point.
Yeah.
By the way, welcome to Beer Net Radio, the podcast where all your dreams come true. I'm here with Jennifer Litz Kirk and Jordan Driggers, our editors, and we're just going to lay down a few words. A-B came out with their second quarter earnings. Rest of the world did fine, but nobody cares. The U.S. just right in line with kind of the scan data, down 15%. Really, the only metric that was positive was revs per hecto, which is pricing. So that's not surprising either. It's the only thing they had in their control. And then one of the things that they said was, that 80% of the people they surveyed had a positive feelings about Bud Light. And
positive or neutral?
Positive, yeah, or neutral, which, I don't know where they found these 80% of people, but maybe around the office in Manhattan, I don't know. Certainly not down here, but it was a lot of people they surveyed, like 100 and
over 170,000.
Yeah, 170,000. So if I don't know what the methodology was, but if that is true, it means that the people who aren't drinking were the very heavy drinkers, disproportionately. Because, who put that in my head actually was Joe Thompson. He called me at like 6:30 this morning. That's why I've been up. You're up covering A-B. I'm up getting called by Joe Thompson. He's like, hell, Harry, it's just all those bubbas that drink about a 12-pack a day. Those are the ones that, and he probably has a point.
But that's...
Yeah.
You don't want to lose those guys.
No.
You're not going to... Bud Light isn't going to be recruiting new drinkers at this point. That was a tall order before the Mulvaney ordeal. And now that they've alienated both sides, we've decided there is such thing as bad press. So...
Right. And then, Molson Coors had their earnings as well, which not that surprising, although they didn't do quite as well as I think people thought they were going to do, but whatever. Mainly, I think Gavin explained it well. They couldn't make enough beer. You can't just wave a wand. They do have capacity restraints in the summer. They're normally running at almost full capacity anyway this time of year. And so add on the, 15% or whatever it is, and it's just, your car doesn't fit in the garage. The math don't work.
It was kind of funny because, and I'm probably ignorant on this, but what I read in the call was that he said this was, part of our big, what is it called? The restructure plan. Revitalization plan. He said, this has been 3 years in the making. And if this would have happened in 2019, we probably wouldn't have been able to do it. Yet they kept citing that our production was at an all-time high, not seen since 2019. So I don't know how that works out.
Well, he's kind of trying to spin it that it's not all about Bud Light's losses, that they've been doing these plans and they finally come to fruition, which of course he's going to say that. And who knows, how do you divine out what is because of Bud Light and what is because of their own efforts? If I remember correctly, their brands were improving before this happened a little bit, right?
But they hadn't seen results like these in the US since the JV 2008, right? And the whole fact that they got 12,000 taps in the quarter. They got 12,000 new taps in the quarter. Jen Hawk, when she spoke at our summit earlier this year, she pegged Bud Light's lines at like 50K. Right. And so to gain 12,000 lines in one quarter, that's
now hold on. Let me do
crazy.
the math. Let's see. You carry the one and two. That's 20%. That's a lot of taps.
I mean,
Yeah, he pegged it at 10%, but I mean, how many more taps can you gain when those are brands that are already on tap pretty much everywhere, you know?
Right.
Like, how many handles are you going to have of Coors Light at a bar?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But I forget, Jay, did he say Coors Light specific or he said overall?
Coors Light, Miller Lite, and Blue Moon made up the majority of those games.
So that makes sense, right? Like Bud Light comes off, maybe you even put Blue Moon on, right? Maybe you put, something else on, but
if I remember again correctly, that's the great thing about podcasts is the spirit of everything is right. Our particular data points may not be because we don't have it right in front of us, but
we'll be directionally correct.
Yeah, exactly, directionally correct. But yeah, Bud Light has by far the most taps in the country, I would think, and at least last time I checked, it did. And so it's kind of like when I was selling beer, it was 25 years ago. So. But, it's really not that different. But when I was selling beer, if you walked into a bar and I was selling Miller Lite and you saw a Michelob tap, you were like, yes, because you knew that you could get that Michelob tap and switch it to Miller Lite. Because I'm not talking about Mich Ultra. I'm talking about Michelob. Michelob was a big brand at one point. And that's kind of how it is right now. You see a Bud Light tap, it's kind of easy game. And it's like big game hunting. You're hunting for taps.
Yeah. I mean, Michelle said that they retain 98% of their taps,
which I find very hard to believe, right? Yeah, those 2 points don't
jive. It seems unbelievable, but at the same point, Harry, what you were making is Bud Light's on tap everywhere. So a 2% loss would still be pretty significant, I think, just on the fact that they're pretty much had 100% distribution wherever.
Right. And a lot of places have 2 Bud Light taps. So
do they? Oh, yeah, that's true.
I mean,
larger venues. Yeah, that's true. But the 98 was company wide. It wasn't just Bud Light. And he did mention that they're losing, if I heard him correctly, some craft handles because they're not as productive as others. But I was like, of course, he never used the word Bud Light in responding to the draft question.
Yeah, that's true.
Or the phrase Bud Light. My biggest thing, my big contribution here that I've been thinking about lately is, obviously these wholesalers, these AB wholesalers, they think it's a big deal, even though, nobody else apparently thinks it's a big deal in light of like better than expected global results. But the local AB wholesalers think it's a big deal because they need to be whole, right? And so what are they picking up to make up the volume difference? And how is that going to change the trajectory of the beer industry, right? Like I was talking to Craft Standard this week, and y'all remember Matt Bruin with Pabst.
Yeah.
Well, he's now with Craft Standard, and what that is, they're cocktail kegs, but like, I forget what kind of kegs, but they're kegs. So they use beer lines, and it's like a non-alc mix that they sell into these lots of stadiums, and they're starting to get into the Buffalo Wild Wings of the world. And that what they've invented this little device that like depressurizes the keg and allows the retailer to add their own spirits. And, this is a startup company, 8 years old, but they're going national with AB wholesalers, right? AB wholesalers are looking for things like this. They're looking for anything that they can make up the difference. And if one of these things takes off, it's going to be interesting, especially if it's spirits oriented, right? They're going to take anything that they can.
Absolutely. And the shelf encroachment's already starting. AB's shelf space. Some accounts, some retailers have already made the move, but in the fall, I think it's going to be pretty tough for AB. Now, whether they'll lose category captainships, I don't know. That might be a different ball game because they're still the biggest brewery in the country, and they may not have the biggest brand by the end of the year if the trends hold up. And, and that's the other thing is that I don't see anything improving. I'm shocked. I mean, we're sitting here in August and Bud Light's still down 29, 30%. It's not improving. They keep saying that share is stabilized. That just means they're losing the same amount of share as they lost back in April. It doesn't mean that they're gaining share.
Right.
So the lack of improvement is shocking to me. And it tells me that whatever they're doing is not working. And, maybe it's not enough time, but man, the sense of urgency, I mean, summer's almost over. We're getting close to Labor Day, or is it Memorial Day?
Labor Day.
Labor.
I always forget. We're getting close to Labor Day. Kids are going to start going back to school. Like, summer's over. I guess that you can write this one off. And like Paul Chive said on the podcast, and thanks for filling in for me, guys, but he's like, we're not picking up all these drinkers are leaving the category, these Bud Light drinkers, a lot of them. And so this whole thing has not been good for the whole beer category. Yeah, it's good for Yuengling and it's good for Pabst and it's good for Molson Coors. It's not going to be good this time next year for them when they're cycling these numbers. It's going to be, tough to maintain it. So I, like I said, I've never seen anything like it and probably won't again. But, and Sarah and I gave a joint presentation to the Texas Package Store Association. Shout out to those guys. Thanks for having us, Lance and Christine, and one of your buddies from Specs, Jen, told me to tell you hello. Anyway, those guys, Sarah and I were looking at each other. We went in early to watch some of their presentations, and we read the room. These guys are real pissed off at AB. And that's what they wanted to talk about. That's what they kept asking us about. And because that's an important brand for their business. Retailers in the largest beer drinking state aren't happy. That's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Anyway, so busy week with Molson Coors, busy week AB. Anything else that we're missing?
And Heineken and Ball just reported, also kind of Ball not doing great either on the back of, what's happened here. Their largest North American customer for Bevalc, right, Jay?
Yeah. And it's not looking good. They're not filling the supply that they thought they would, and missing revenue and having to explain on earnings, kind of having to point the finger at AB. So
yeah, because if you'll remember in their first quarter earnings call, they were with glee hoping for a price war. They're like, all the elements are perfect for a price war, and so we're going to sell the shit out of cans this summer. And the price war didn't materialize. It's where the price war we're seeing is one-sided. It's not a war. It's just somebody battling themselves with giving free rebates on beer, and the others have not followed because they haven't had to. AB did, I think, has a lucky break in that the shortage of Modelo kegs out there that probably slowed them losing taps of Bud Light and Mick Ultra.
I think Molson Coors caught a really lucky break there too. Yeah. Molson Coors is coming up after an unfortunate stretch for like the past 3 years. They're coming heads up on everything Jordan, right now.
It turns out that this revitalization plan is really working. We just had to wait. We weren't waiting long enough. But sure enough, when you're patient, things come.
No, and Dos Equis is probably going to see a big pop on draft because of the whole Constellation keg deal, which, you said anything else, we should briefly mention that this thing, which started at the beginning of the summer or, late June, we keep thinking, it's resolved. And then we'll get large retailers or distributors going, I don't have any kegs for the foreseeable future, right? Like, I don't know how big of a deal this is. I mean, it's a big deal to certain players. It might not be as large of Constellation's mix as it is for some other brewers, but
Heineken, honestly, it's good that this happened. Heineken needed a break. I mean, God bless them. They needed this can supply it. What they'll do is they'll make the Dos Equis in Amsterdam and then ship it over. It'll be here for Oktoberfest.
Speaking of Oktoberfest, there's more bad news. We got pumpkin beer at retail now, and it's 105 degrees outside.
Well, You better go out and drink it up, Jen, before it's all gone. Because, that's another thing that when I started in this business, I know you guys just love it when I tell anecdotes about my early days in the business. But when I was in the business, all the retailers require different UPC codes for each package, including seasonals. And Walmart just announced that they are not doing that anymore. They're not going to allow you to have the same UPC code for all your seasonals. You're going to have a different one. And that is a huge deal and a huge pain in the ass because a lot of times you have overlap with the seasonal. You still have a seasonal there. You still want to sell some of it, but then you have the new seasonal coming in. And how are you going to have both those UPCs in the same spot on the, on the shelf? And then telling the woman at the back door,
Harry's beloved woman at the back door.
We need to create a character because every distributor that's listening to this podcast knows exactly who I'm talking about. There's one at every back door. It's usually a woman. She usually has a mustache, and she's but you have to hire kind of a badass, kind of a junkyard dog to police that back door because those Frito guys, they will come in and they'll fuck you every time. They cut in line, and don't get me started on Dolly Madison. Don't get me started on the little cupcake guys because they will cut in line. Everybody thinks, though, the beer guy has to wait for his check anyway. Put him in the back of the line. No, fuck that. No, sir. You know how much more profitable we are than Dolly Madison or Twinkies? Anyway, don't get me started. I'm already in a bad mood. Biscuit's been just sneaking out, trying to solve crimes, and ends up, committing crimes.
Yeah, she's just too old. She can't.
I know.
She just can't anymore.
No.
But I have a question for you, Harry. I know your question about whether we're tired of you talking about the good old days was a rhetorical one, and you didn't really want an answer. And so I'll answer it with another question. Do you ever get tired of us making fun of you on the beginning of a pod that you're not on?
Oh, yeah. You do know I listen to those, Jen, because I have to edit them.
Oh, we know.
Yeah. No, it was what I found funny about that was Jen was like, where is Harry? Why is he going down there? What is he doing? It's been on the calendar for a year and a half, literally, because they asked us. So, it really has. It really has.
Well, that's what you do to me on pods.
No, I know. I'm not throwing stones here, Jen. I'm just as bad at not checking the calendar. But Jordan was like, no, I actually think he's speaking.
Yeah.
He's not just blowing it off.
Harry, you're good about putting stuff on your calendar. You're terrible about checking your calendar.
Right.
It'll be on there for a year and a half, and then somebody will be like, oh, we're waiting on you.
Yeah.
You're on stage in an hour.
Right. Yeah.
I need to take a bath.
Yeah. There's only been 2 events that I've completely missed. One was an analyst call. So no big deal. I mean, kind of a big deal. It was a big deal to him. He had all his clients waiting on a line.
I can't even imagine.
Then, it was pretty bad. I felt terrible. But the worst one was the Tennessee wholesalers. They asked me, and I don't remember them asking me. It wasn't in my calendar. And then I wasn't there. I didn't show up. Who is
AK?
AK Detwiller. She didn't speak to me for like a year. And then Jordan, you were there. She came up to me at the Molson Coors meeting in Nashville. And she was like, you're such an asshole. I was like, why don't you return my calls? She was like, you didn't show up at the Tennessee thing. I was like, oh man, I really don't recall being asked, but I guess, whew, good times. So next week we got Monster. We'll see what they have to say.
We have Monster today. Bianca's covering that. It reports at the close. So we'll know.
It's been a jam-packed day.
It's been a week.
It really has. The whole week. Yeah. You guys have done great. I want you to know that the studio is coming along perfectly. They delivered some lumber. It's in my yard today. I'm going to be building out a base for the table so it'll be on wheels. It's a lot of production for something we may or may not even use. But however, it will be there. And locksmith's coming tomorrow, so I'll have keys. And Jordan, I'll give you a key if you want to come and use it. It's got air conditioning. I don't know if you've heard of this invention, air conditioning. It's very important. Oh yeah. We don't mess around here, right, Biscuit? That's right. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for being on such short notice. We'll just do a short one. We encourage you to watch the Paul Chibe interview that's also up. I I listened to it. It was, but despite the bullshit cannery that went on in the beginning, it was a very well-run interview, and he had a lot of good things to say. And I'm really looking forward, honestly, to Pabst's new office on Broadway. I know that building that they're in. Actually, my bank's across the street, so I go there once a week. So I'll just probably drop in. Hey, guys. Yeah, got any beer on tap? I go there on my one wheel.
What I love about Paul is that, like, he's such a nerd for the industry, right? Like when he was at DPS, he was talking about like how he can tell when like the shellac on the chiclets hasn't sat long enough. And he's like calling the manufacturer. That is, he's not just a marketing guy. He's not just a CEO. He cares about the integrity of the product. He's a nerd. I love it.
He really does. And what's funny about that, Jen, is that he doesn't look like a nerd. Like he has all the appearance of a Chicago tough guy, that maybe knock some heads.
An enforcer.
Yeah, he looks like an enforcer. And then, you meet him and he's actually a very soft-spoken and very intelligent, and he does care, and he's a lot smarter than he looks. That's a terrible thing to say.
We'll edit that in post.
He's extremely bright. I had a real long conversation with him at the reception after the DPS, and he's real concerned about the health of the industry. And so anyway, all right. Well, guys, listen, have a good weekend if I don't talk to you, and we will shout at you guys next week. Adios.
Right. Cheers.